Can we talk about this piece out in the New Republic entitled "The Democrats Finally Have a Plan to Attack Trump"? Sort of. The title absolutely sums up how I feel about the attack strategy that we are seeing from establishment Democrats, Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. And I've been sitting on this piece for a couple of days, but I find it especially not ironic, but appropriate in light of what we've seen the last couple of days out of Gavin Newsom's office, out of progressive Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna. Specifically, Newsom's aggressive immediate pushback against Trump's spectacle PR stunt in MacArthur Park, and then Newsom's office having that epic own of Stephen Miller on Twitter, in which they called him a fascist cuck. And then Ro Khanna calling Donald Trump's bluff when it comes to the Epstein file. Sorry, I keep looking down. I'm trying desperately to finish my knitting, y'all, and I keep dropping stitches. So, we've seen Democratic electeds who understand how to stand up against fascism and actually have worked on some strategizing. We see lots and lots of progressive Democrats. In fact, like my Congresswoman Maxine Dexter, Representative Maxwell Frost, and I forgot her name for a second, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. They have all gone to visit these concentration camps where immigrants are being held, trying to use their platforms and their influence and their constitutional right of oversight to draw attention to the human rights violations that are happening all over this country. It's not just Alligator Auschwitz in the Everglades, it's happening in places all over this country. We see progressive members of the Democratic Party who are trying so hard to fight back. We are seeing folks who have a compelling message that absolutely could be winning in the midterms, who understand what the American people want, who understand the ways that we are being hurt by the Trump regime. And by we, I don't just mean left-leaning folks. I mean working class people across the spectrum. The progressive message is one that is incredibly compelling and that gets people to turn out and vote, right? Look at Zoran Mamdani. His platform was one that was compelling. It was the highest turnout of Gen Z voters, I think, ever for a New York mayoral race. And it was just the primary. I know we've talked about this at Indivisible, and Ezra and Leah, who are the co-founders of Indivisible, have mentioned this as well, that it is the morally right thing to do to stand up against the inhumane things that the Trump regime is doing around immigration. It is also a politically savvy thing to do. We know from all kinds of recent polling that not only are we seeing Americans have the most highly favorable opinion of immigration in the last 25 years, 79% of Americans think immigration is a good thing for us, but also for our nation. And Democrats have thought, we can't talk about this because, Americans want us to be tough on immigration. But you have to understand, when Trump was saying he was going to be tough on immigration, he was also spouting these lies that there was millions of illegals who are all violent criminals and gang members who are wanting to rape your daughters and break into your houses. And that's simply not true. And so now that Republicans are finding out that oh no, it's the people who grow and harvest our food. It's families who've been here for decades. It's, people who have been here, it's beer o'clock, peacefully living their lives, paying their taxes, raising their families, contributing meaningfully to the economy. These are people that we know and we interact with and may work for us, or they are folks that are valued members of our congregations. We didn't mean those folks. We thought you meant just violent criminals. So now that we know what you're doing, Donald Trump, we are actually opposed to it. Republicans don't like what's happening. Independent voters really don't like what's happening. So a great plan of attack against Trump would be for Democrats to actually speak out against his horrible, inhumane immigration policies and the ways that they are a threat not only to our constitutional rights as citizens, but to all of our immigrant neighbors. How it's inhumane, it's cruel, it's bad for the economy, it's bad for American society overall. Because voters are already there. They want to hear that. They want affirmation of what they already believe. They're ready. They're ready to condemn what Trump is doing. But yet we're still seeing establishment Democrats being we can't touch immigration. It's the morally right thing to do. It's the politically savvy thing to do, but we're not willing to talk about it yet. And I know that I'm one of millions of people who is perpetually frustrated with establishment corporate Democratic leadership, the way that they are going to pander to their big donors and have not been willing to stand up and do what is right to meet the moment. And more than that, they have been trying to squash down progressive members of the party who are ready, who understand the assignment, are raring to go They are constantly being punished and suppressed by corporate establishment Democrats. And I think there's really no greater example of this than how establishment Democratic leadership, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, have treated Zohran Mamdani in New York City. I mean, we can talk about the absolutely tepid response and bizarre criticisms, Islamophobic statements that are coming out of establishment Democrats from New York, who are simultaneously upset that somebody who will not support AIPAC has gotten the nomination, and also upset that somebody who has a huge appeal, who is highly electable, was not the establishment Democratic candidate of Andrew Cuomo. Zohran Mamdani poses a threat to establishment politics, but he is a highly electable Democrat, and they should be really excited about him. They should be vote blue no matter who. Cool. He is the Democrat Party's nominee for the New York City mayoral race. They should be vigorously supporting him. In fact, it got so bad that a dozen indivisible chapters from New York had to write to Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and demand that they formally back Mamdani for the New York City mayoral race. He's the Democratic nominee, and they weren't getting behind him. You would think, after all of the ways that the Republicans have mangled their chances for the midterms, all the ways they've pissed off the electorate when it comes to the passage of the big bloated budget bill, and now the way Trump is tanking himself with his failure to release the Epstein files and being like, guys, forget about this. Just let's forget that this is a thing, even though he ran on it as a huge campaign promise that he would unveil the Epstein files and expose the deep state. And MAGA are freaking the fuck out right now. Like, the midterms are the Democrats to lose. They cannot fumble the ball, y'all. They cannot fumble. But it's so hard to want to believe when we have seen just such ineptitude from Democratic leadership, because they're afraid to stand up for democracy. They're afraid to be aggressive. They're afraid to take on difficult issues, which will be popular with the American people. And now we're seeing, Mamdani supporters who are saying, okay, it's time to primary Hakeem Jeffries. We've seen loads of calls for Chuck Schumer to be primaried, for AOC to primary him. We're seeing progressive members of the party get more and more fed up. I mean, y'all, there are more than 100 members of the Progressive Caucus in Congress. We know that Mamdani's positions are incredibly popular with voters. They activate young voters to show up at the polls especially. This is politics that folks can get excited about. These are policies that are compelling to people no matter what party they are a part of. We're now reaching a point where after the passage of this big bloated budget bill, more and more Republicans are like, what the fuck? They just cut Medicaid and SNAP to give billionaires a giant tax break? Wait a minute. I voted for this party because I'm all about reducing the deficit, and they're ballooning it trillions and trillions of dollars to give billionaires a giant tax break. It just seems to me like everything this regime is doing is for the billionaires and not for the working class. They're not making America great again for me. They have no intention of doing that. Right? Like the blinders are off for more and more folks. And that's where this new sort of plan from Democratic establishment to destroy the Republicans in the midterms comes into play. They are planning on using the passage of this big bloated budget bill, and they want to tattoo all the Medicaid cuts. That's what Hakeem Jeffries said, tattoo it all over Republicans. Politico says Republicans and Donald Trump pushing through this big, horrible bill, which is just devastating for all of us, has renewed bravado after months in the political wilderness for the Democratic Party. And they're planning on fighting back. Not yet. In a few weeks, y'all. In a few weeks, the August recess, they're going to get started on this fight. So their plan is to make Republicans be accountable for what they have done by passing this big bloated budget bill. Unfortunately, most of the pain is not going to be felt by the American people until after the midterms. Republicans knew how to structure that in there so that people would not be as angry in the midterms and would not be as likely to vote against them. But Democrats really want to drive home these Medicaid and SNAP cuts, and I guess they're not really talking so much about the $150 billion for ICE and the concentration camps. It's the Medicaid cuts that they think are going to win them the midterms. I'm going to quote this line here. If there's one thing that Democrats do seem committed to, it's their August timetable for finally unleashing the spittin', cussin', new look party to officially open the midterm election campaign. This line really stood out to me from the article. This is the time for Democrats to get a lot less civil. I don't see mild-mannered establishment corporate Democrats doing that. I think the progressives are going to have to stage a little bit of a takeover. I think we're going to have to see us, the voters, primarying these establishment Democrats. We're going to have to work for our democracy, y'all. We're going to have to work at the primary level. It cannot rest on the shoulders of establishment corporate Democrats to finally figure out how to fight back. The midterms are their race to lose, but I think it's still going to be up to us to make sure that they don't lose it.